So I've written quite a few stories about open data, and I must say I'm a little bit cynical about what it's done so far. And it's going to be interesting to hear what a data-enabled business such as Cape can tell us about the way it's informing what it's doing and enabling what it's doing in a new business model. So, if I can hand over now to our next speaker, Ryan Edwards-Pritchard, who's the CEO and founder of Cape. Ryan, over to you.
Hello. Hey everyone, great to be here. So I'm Ryan. I'm the founder and CEO of Cape. I'm here today to talk about, as Lachlan mentioned, open banking and CDR. It's obviously the elephant in the room. I haven't been here for all the sessions, but I can imagine it's been there. It's been much discussed in terms of what it is and what it's about. I think in short, the key thing to be mindful of is the Australian government, a little bit like the UK government, has actually introduced this piece of quite innovative policy to address some of the problems that we've got in the industry around competition and choice for consumers and businesses. The question really is then just in terms of the terminology differences between CDR and open banking, because I think everybody's probably seen as these two things get used quite interchangeably. So first of all, when we talk about open banking, we're talking about anybody here in terms of third parties, such as yourselves there in the audience, being able to get approved access to your customers' bank accounts and to access information on all sorts of different things. Whereas actually, if you look at CDR itself, the opportunity there is far more reaching. It actually covers all utility products. So in terms of today, I'm not going to go into CDR as a whole because that is an absolute minefield in terms of what may play out over the next couple of years. Whereas I'm actually just going to focus on the opportunity in open banking. So whilst I do that, just to move on to the, I guess a little bit about me and my background. So prior to Cape, I was actually previously running Europe's largest digital marketplace for SME finance. That's a company called Funding Options. So a one-stop shop for all different types of finance, anything from £1,000 up to 10 million. And we made it just as a real quick, easy process for business owners being able to access that finance. We were one of the first businesses actually in the world to utilize open banking data. That was back in 2017, believe it or not. Let's come on to my background, Funding Options, SME marketplace. We're one of the first companies in the world to utilize open banking data back in 2017 now. And then actually something which is relevant for today is we partnered with all sorts of banks, challenger banks, incumbent banks, and actually anybody that worked with an SME, and we essentially plugged our marketplace via an API into our marketplace of SME lenders. And a lot of the time it was to protect the balance sheets of certain lenders where they didn't want to actually fund those customers, such as ING, Metro Bank, very prevalent today in terms of tightening credit risk profiles, but at other times it was more about actually embedding in finance at the point of the journey to take out friction from a point of sale as such. Coming on to today, we're building Cape. I heard Lachlan's points before. We're a spend management platform powered by open banking data. We're going to be issuing corporate cards, business credit cards specifically, which we'll come on to later on. So history, what I did want to do, Daniel from the CEO was good enough to actually share with me today's audience, and it's incredible. There's 300 or so people, and actually I think the vast majority, over 90% of people here, don't actually work in banking and don't work in fintech specifically. So a lot of this might be somewhat alien. So what I wanted to do was just have a quick look over our shoulder in terms of what's been. Well, this is the journey in terms of banking and financial services to date. What we've actually seen is digital adoption obviously speed up. I mean, I don't really need to tell you guys this, but in terms of the last 18, 24 months, we're all been working from home and everybody's been working off the mobiles. And more banking and financial services is expected to go in that way. With that, the trend that we'd seen anyway over the last 10 years, 20 years was the closure of bank branches, the closure of relationship managers, a way of doing things differently. So people are now expecting something different when it comes to how they interact with a financial services product. More specifically in terms of what's been going on in the industry, The pandemic has definitely hit the banking sector, and it's been underperforming in comparison to pretty much every single industry, bar energy, with stocks falling by 22% over the last 3 years alone. So we've seen the net interest margin specifically, so that this is the way that banks make money, severely deteriorate over that period. And the question then comes to, why is it that we're seeing such a strong deterioration? Well, there he is, Bill Gates. And I'm sure you guys have seen this quote many times. If you haven't, it really kind of sums things up perfectly. Banking is necessary, but banks are not. As I was preparing for this, it was something that I've always known about in terms of this quote from Bill Gates. It's often chimed, especially in fintech circles. What I was amazed to find out was this quote actually came from 1994, 27 years ago. So Bill's assessment in terms of where banking and financial services was more true then, well, in fact, was true then as it is now. And it's just taken us some time to actually get there. The question then is, in terms of the deterioration of profit by the banks, who is eating into this margin? Where is it all going? And actually, what we're starting to see is the fintechs starting to get in from a wedge-like element, and actually starting to open up the pockets, the wallets of consumers and businesses, and not just them. And we'll come on to this point later on, just to the point about Bill Gates there. It's not just fintechs that are coming into the party. You're talking about, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons, and everybody else now is starting to look into banking and financial services, and is actually capturing some of that profit that used to go directly to the banks themselves. So, and in doing that, the big thing is all about the democratization of finance and financial products, especially to the underbanked. The question then again is, why is it that the banks the fintechs in particular, are winning so much market share from incumbents? And I did just hear the last part of the roundtable that we had, and that element of building automated agents that do things for your customers, whether it's finding the best investment rates, saving rates, auto switching. Ultimately, that's what the fintechs have been focusing on. They've been focusing on the outcomes, or the outputs, I should say, and focusing less in terms of the way that the banks have typically looked at things, and that's what's actually turned the dial for a lot of customers actually adopting fintech solutions. So coming on to the main thing of today, and again, I've just mindful of the fact that we've got a lot of people here that are coming in from outside of banking and financial services. So I'm trying to provide a bit of an overview of consumers, open banking solutions, SME, open banking solutions, and then we can talk more broadly about other things as well. Oh, there we go. That's a different slide. So to come on to timelines, in fact, first of all, the open banking regulation actually came into play last July, and already in the last 12 months, we've started to see some players come into this space, building more specifically consumer-led solutions. So we should mention that there's a two-phase process of timelines over the next couple of years, and it's starting off with consumers. It then moves into joint accounts, and then it moves into SMEs. Unfortunately, the poor cousins, as always, they are in terms of SMEs. And then actually it broadens the scope in terms of what data we're going to be able to get access to, and also looking into things. There's a lot of legislation and talk of legislation around both read and write access for fintechs such as ourselves. Looking at some of the solutions that have come in, first of all, so I've just tried to pick out a few that I thought, given the audience that we've got, might find interesting. One of them, first of all, Uno Home Loans. So mortgages, we're a big debt country and we've got a lot of mortgages. So one of the first solutions that came out was, and popular solutions I should mention, is this. The mortgage market in terms of Australia is worth around about $1.8 trillion. So it's an enormous opportunity. I think the thing that people often talk about it when they talk about these type of products, if you're a product person listening, is I don't want a mortgage. I want a home. I want keys to get into my home. And ultimately for us as product people, it is all about how do you make that process as slick and seamless as possible for somebody to be able to get access to that. So that's one thing. The next is then wealth management. Again, something we've often talked about is how do we actually help the underbanked? And one of the things that the banking industry has actually really not been able to do is roll out personal banking, private banking solutions to the masses. And this is where open banking is starting to come in. So Moneysoft is starting to tackle that. And then account aggregation. So for those not in the know, account aggregation is actually one of the most popular use cases that every regulator around the world often goes to say, this is the thing. It's about, we've all got multiple different accounts. Can we aggregate them into one view? And then if you're, for example, a lender, can you then better assess in terms of the flow of money into an account and out of the account? Because that's how actually we just live our lives. And whether that's me as an individual or whether you're in a couple and it's two of you and that's how your household income works, this aggregation helps give you a better picture of what's actually going on. Moving on from that, more specifically then the SME side. Now, we've not got open banking yet live for SME usage. However, there are different ways that you can access this data. Now, historically, this has been through bank statements. So if you're building products around SMEs, I mean, I'm not even lying, back in the UK before open banking was live, we used to get customers to send in literally pictures of their bank statements, taking a picture off their phone, emailing it, sending it over to us. So we could actually then push that data through our OCR to then actually look at their credit worthiness. You've then got screen scraping, which we know is clunky and not particularly secure. And then open banking has gone live more recently. And actually, the emergence of some of these solutions have been fantastic over the last 4 years. And I think this, I don't want to say it's a crystal ball, but I mean, we've got an ability here to actually stand on the shoulder of giants and look at what's worked and what hasn't worked in other markets. That relationship in particular between Tide and iWalker. Tide, for those that aren't aware, is a digital challenger bank. iWalker, alternative finance lender. Ultimately, Tide's business current account customers has been able to authenticate iWalker access to their data on an ongoing basis. That then allows iWalker to then preemptively within Tide's app itself to then tell a customer, business customer of Tide, you've been pre-approved for this, what is effectively an overdraft. Click here to take it. So really moving towards a very seamless journey for accessing credit for business customers, which usually takes days, weeks, months sometimes. Fluidly is another player, cash flow management, cash flow forecasting. God knows if you run a business, this is the thing that keeps you up at night. They've done a fantastic job of letting you know what comes in, what goes out. And then Cap on Tap. So one of the interesting things with them is more the identification of intangible assets. So for a lot of the time, unsecured lending is quite big, especially in this market as well. But your ability for customers that don't fit your credit risk profile, your ability to then actually look into their data and find other collateral, PGs, covenants, or anything that you could then use to secure the loan against, might then allow you to then open up access to credit to them. And Cap on Tap's done a great job with that. Just moving on, won't dwell too much on this today, but we've just announced our own partnership with Basic. So we're going to be utilizing their infrastructure initially so that we can actually carry out the credit assessment process for small business customers. Anybody interested in terms of what that looks like, come hit me up afterwards and I'll show you. What does the future hold? Well, it's not just about banks and fintechs, it's about everything else. So I mentioned before in terms of where are we seeing the market move towards? Well, we're seeing it move towards the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons of the world. And we're moving towards a world where banking and lending is invisible. It is in the background. It is something which happens without much thought or process around it. What does that really mean in terms of right now? Well, so we started off talking about Bill Gates, talking about do we really need banks? Well, actually, moving on, that was 30 years ago. Moving on to today, Andreessen Horowitz is actually talking about the fact that we're all going to be a fintech. And that's being made available by the API economy that we're now living in. So yes, we're talking about open banking today, but actually talking more broadly, it's never been easier for you to offer financial service products out to your customers. One thing to kind of just mention on this, and I'm just aware of time, is if you're a non-financial business, it's thinking about how do you actually integrate financial products into your offering that might not be mission critical. There's a fantastic article that's out there by Paddy McCormack, which is talking about its APIs all the way down. And he just talks about the ability for businesses such as Facebook to integrate with the likes of Twilio and not have to invest into SMS infrastructure, or for the likes of, say, Shopify to integrate with Stripe so that they can focus on their main mission, not with payments infrastructure. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of businesses moving towards. And then wrapping up very quickly, things to be aware of: open banking adoption. These are some of the friction points that came out from the UK market, and we're going to see the same things come out. I expect, I hope, hypothesize over here in terms of the Australian market. So be mindful in terms of how you communicate. If you are looking at utilizing open banking and requesting your customers to provide you with access to data that isn't in your vaults, well, how are you communicating that access and the benefits to them? What you need to remember is, or at least from the UK, open banking as a name is incredibly misleading, given the fact that we've all been brought up in this day and age of, don't give out your personal details, your personal data to everybody else. And then all of a sudden we're talking about open data, open finance. It's a bit of a backward way to name something, if you ask me. Other thing to be aware of, and this is more for any of the banks out there, you will be benchmarked against your peers. I think the interesting thing was this took about 2.5, 3 years to come out. But eventually, once we had some stability around the APIs, everybody started looking at, well, let's have a look at the banks themselves and how are they actually performing when it comes to providing us third parties, whether it's fintechs or non-fintechs, access to their APIs and access to the underlying customers. What we did see when open banking went live was a lot of scaremongering, was a lot of the big banks going out there, beating the drum in terms of the PR, the press machines, in terms of worrying people about providing fintechs with access to their data. It was very much defense. And actually in terms of the banks being defensive, they don't want to give out their data to all of us, right? And I can completely appreciate that. But the problem was that there's a death by 1,000 cuts. And actually, eventually, they've got a choice. Either they continue to play defense or they go offense. And actually, what we've seen in terms of the UK market is people switch from defense to offense and start to go and try and take the market and compete. That takes a big mindset shift, right? And is that going to happen overnight over here? I doubt it. May it happen over a period of time? Possibly. We'll see. Sorry if I seem a bit skeptical on that one. And then solving the innovator's dilemma. I guess kind of last but not least, if you're looking to go down this route, be mindful right now where open banking is, whether you've got a consumer product or an SME product. Be mindful in terms of the build out. There is right now a long and expensive accreditation process that you can get access to the plumbing, to the infrastructure. There is a number of different third-party providers that can help provide you with access to your customers' transactional bank account data, so the likes of Follow, the likes of Basic. There's a couple of others out there, again, happy to help anybody out. But have a clear understanding of what it is that you're trying to do with that journey, and then a clear project plan over the next 3 to 6 months in terms of building that into your core products. And that's it. I'm aware I've gone a couple of minutes over, probably with faffing about at the start, so apologies. Thank you to everybody for your time. For anybody that is interested to talk about this further, I absolutely love talking about it. Hit me up on LinkedIn. For anybody who's working with business customers, SMEs, would love to talk to you about how we might be able to collaborate together. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ryan. But I'm not going to let you go quite yet. I've got a couple of questions, and there's one from the floor. I'll just ask.
Darn it.
Yeah. So look, I'm just interested in the nature of the data that you're accessing. How easy is it to access it, and how dependent on your business model is it?
Oh, good question. So in terms of the data, first of all, or data, I should say, in terms of the data itself, so in terms of the use case for somebody like Cape, and this is going to be the same, I've seen the list, right? There's a load of banks on here as well. We're looking for transactional bank account data. So I mentioned before in terms of looking for intangible assets, but just put that aside for 1 second. What we're looking for is uninterrupted access to live transactional data so that we can see exactly what their average cash balance is. And then we can dig one bit further in terms of understanding what those peaks and troughs look like. So unlike a consumer, like a business like trading, it literally goes every way. It goes up, it goes down, it goes forward, it goes backward. It's incredibly unpredictable. However, we need access to it to understand what's going on. And equally, because of our line of credit, because it's actually a personalized line of credit to the trading scenario of the business, our line of credit goes up and down and adjusts with the business customer. Unlike, the big gorilla in our space is American Express, which takes more of an approach of set and forget. So that is to say that they set a specific line of credit for the customer and they forget about it. Whereas we'd rather take the approach of low and grow. We start off with a low amount of credit. We grow in confidence with them over time. If that scenario in terms of trading history changes, it changes with them. So for us, it's access to the transactional data initially, and that is to help improve and speed up the actual onboarding journey of the customer. And then also from an ongoing perspective is to adjust the line of credit for the customer. It's relatively easy for us to do. I think, I don't want to quote it, but I think it's been about 300 hours worth of engineering time to build out the integration with Basic. And that's product engineering design time in total.
Excellent. Now we have a question from the floor. I'll ask you the second part of it, and perhaps you can go into the Q&A function and answer the first part. This is from Dougberg. Will we see more strategic consolidation in the space going forward? After Pay and Square, an obvious example, that could be a data privacy concern for individuals and SMEs.
Oh, hell yeah. There is absolutely no doubt. Let's be clear, right? After Pay, Square, like these guys are buying the market, but I'd still say to everybody, because it's funny, everybody gets their knickers in a twist about this stuff. Everybody seems to lose sight of who the big competitors are in this space. It's the banks, the big four. There's a couple of you on here. You own over 90% of the market. You have done for centuries, right? So like, are there issues in terms of consolidation of some of these players? I really hope that we start seeing some more competition for the big four. I actually think it'll be good for the big four. Believe it or not, this might be controversial for them to hear, but actually that's what really spurs innovation. And like real development. Will we see consolidation in terms of this? Potentially, I actually think the most interesting thing when you actually look at the BNPL players is more their channels of acquisition and distribution in terms of their ability to actually acquire merchants, customers for relatively nothing. And then actually, I guess, kind of diversifying horizontally out to a lot of different products. So I think that is definitely possible. Just back to the question though, even if the consolidation in terms of acquisitions doesn't happen, the API economy that we actually live in, what we're now starting to see is more the bundling up in terms of products again. So over the last 10 to 15 years, what I've seen is the unbundling of banks by fintechs and technology providers. But what that's meant, if you're a consumer or if you're a business owner, is a pretty shit experience. It means you've got 10, 15 different products that you need to operate out of. That higgledy-piggledy, there ain't no interoperability between them. There's lots of data accuracy issues. And actually, the best thing that could happen in terms of the next couple of years, which is where I think we're going anyway, is this rebundling of all of these different third-party services. And ultimately, back to the point of Paddy McCormack there, I think what we're starting to see is businesses realize, let's just own this one thing. Let's do this one thing really well. Let's become the hub as a product. And then let's, I often describe it as a hub and a spoke of a wheel, if you can imagine it. Like, what's our hub? What's our core as our value proposition? And then what are the spokes that we're then offering? Don't build the spokes, like go and utilize all the great technology companies that are out there. You focus on the interoperability and actually focus on the jobs to be done. And the example which we talked about in terms of Uno Home Loans before around that mortgage experience, it is horrible having to try and get a mortgage, right? Where there's so many different things to do. Whereas if you can just own that end to end and you can just death by 1,000 slices, cut out all of that friction, how much joy can you deliver to people given what size of market that is? So I think we'll see more of that happening in terms of consolidation as opposed to just acquisition. But I ain't got a crystal ball, so who knows?
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. That's Ryan Edwards-Pritchard from Cape. Thanks for your time.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Cheers. Bye.